Uh-oh.
If there's any way to possibly make that fight, whether that's a catch weight at 40 or maybe a little higher than that, would you be down to do it?
Yeah, 100%. I think the fans want to see that rematch. I wanted that rematch right away. It's a shame it didn't happen. We both could have made a lot of money. The hype was huge, as you know. But ultimately, it was probably better for me. It was time for me to move up, and staying down would have definitely held me back. So we offered her a fight. Instead of the Sandy rematch, we sent her an offer to fight. She didn't accept it for whatever reason.
This was at what weight?
We offered a catch weight. We would have gone down.
Got it.
And, for whatever reason, now looking back, it's probably because she was in negotiations with MVP.
So it would seem that an effort was made in between the time Michaela beats Sandy Ryan and the time that she schedules a rematch with her to do a second Baumgardner fight. It's still a spicy fight. It's still one of the best fights you can hope to make in the sport of women's boxing, but Alicia was otherwise preoccupied. It's just like Michaela said. She was probably prioritizing her migration from Matchroom over to MVP, so she wasn't going to make a commitment to a fight at that time. It's still possible. Contingent upon a few things. I think Michaela has to win the rematch with Sandy this weekend. Beyond that, there's talk of a Lauren Price fight, but I'm not confident they'll get that one over the line. Lauren's going to want that in her native Wales, and they're going to have to spend a pretty penny to get Michaela Mayer over there, given her experiences abroad, her experiences in the United Kingdom. You want her to concede home field advantage, and I don't think she's going to do that easily. Could lead to a stalemate, at which point Michaela could be in the market for somebody else, say a Natasha Jonas rematch, since Natasha hasn't retired, or a Baumgardner rematch. Still a distinct possibility, especially now that Alicia is with Most Valuable Promotions and they're in bed with Netflix. I could see the second fight between them landing there, and that would be great for them and great for women's boxing. This time, even more people would see it on an even bigger platform across a broader region. Most Valuable Promotions had enough to make not one, but two Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano fights, the last two of the trilogy. They had enough money to get Katie to come over. So if they had enough money for Katie, I think they'll have enough money for Michaela. Now, she mentioned a catch weight, though not a specific number. For it to be a welterweight title fight, it's got to be anywhere in between just north of 140 to 147. Anywhere in there for it to be a title fight, because Alicia Baumgardner doesn't have a title at 135. All of her titles are at 130, and there's no chance Michaela Mayer boils down to that weight. Not at this time and not at this age. Not sure how much longer she's going to stay there, but she is still undisputed champion in the super featherweight division. Down the line, I could see a move up to 135 for maybe a Stephanie Hahn fight. WBA champion at 135. An easier fight to make than some other fights because Stephanie Hahn isn't with a major promotional outfit, so I think that MVP would be more than capable of making her a decent-sized offer, decent enough to get her to defend her title against Alicia en route to a potential Michaela Mayer fight. I could see that. A Michaela Mayer rematch. Who wins? Anywhere north of 135. You have to give Michaela the edge because she'll be more acclimated to that weight than Alicia. Don't get me wrong, Alicia is very good. But in a situation where she hasn't had a chance to get used to 140 or get used to 147. Say she just jumps up there, dares to be great. You have to give the edge to Michaela because she's more used to fighting at that weight
than Alicia. Their initial meeting was close and competitive, and Alicia did enough to win, but it was just enough. It wasn't emphatic.
She didn't ragdoll Michaela. She didn't beat the hell out of her. She beat her, and she beat her fair and square. But it was competitive. Whereas at 147, or just anywhere around there, Michaela will have the edge because she's used to carrying all that weight, at least more than Alicia would be.
We've seen situations right there at 130 where Alicia is now, where she sort of punched herself out, blew her load, and had to take a round off.
You know that could happen at a higher weight that she's not used to from having to carry around the extra pounds.
Could happen. I suppose it all depends on when the fight takes place, where the fight takes place, and what the circumstances are leading up to it. But if what we're talking about is just jumping up there like that from 130 to 147, yeah, you'd have to give Michaela the edge.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. First, Michaela has to settle up with Sandy Ryan one more time. I think she's going to beat her. I think she's going to win a points decision. But let's see if she does.
Men's super middleweight news. Former IBF champion Caleb Plant could headline May 31st PBC show in Vegas.
Premier Boxing Champions is in talks to stage a May 31st fight card in Vegas, headlined by WBA interim super middleweight title holder Caleb Plant. Two officials connected to the discussions told Boxing Scene. Plant, 23-2 with 14 knockouts, a former IBF champion at super middle, last fought in September of last year, defeating Trevor McCumbee by 9th round TKO to gain the interim position behind three-belt champion Saul Canelo Alvarez, who defeated Plant back in 2021. Plant's deal is not finalized, and an official connected to the talks said the opponent has not been formally selected either.
You think that these guys are getting in Vegas what they're not getting from Amazon? That their way of pooling money together now is pairing themselves with the casinos out there?
Sounds like it, because we know that Amazon isn't giving them a budget. They're just a hub for the PBC to distribute their shows, but they're not giving them a budget.
So this could be how they're surviving now. Edgar Berlanga called out Caleb Plant following Berlanga's easy knockout win
March 15th in Florida, the final bout under his contract with Matchroom Boxing. An individual close to Berlanga said he will likely return in September against Plant, Jermall Charlo, or Jaime Munguia, when it would seem that his opportunity has arrived much sooner.
If what you want to do is fight Caleb Plant, he's fighting in late May.
One individual said Charlo, 33-0 with 22 KOs, may land on the May 31st card in what would be his first bout since November of 2023. Charlo lost his WBC middleweight title in May of last year following his arrest for allegedly driving while intoxicated and two other charges. PBC scrapped its earlier May 3rd card at the T-Mobile Arena in Vegas, headlined by Canelo, when Canelo instead opted to strike a 4-fight deal with Saudi Arabia's Turki El Sheikh. Alvarez will fight in Riyadh on May 3rd now against IBF super middleweight champion William Skull, and is planning to fight Terence Crawford in September.
That means the world title situation at super middleweight is all tied up between Canelo Alvarez, William Skull, and what happens in September. Guys like Caleb won't get a chance to fight for a full title for a while.
Back over to Caleb and who it is he's going to be fighting in May. If he is fighting in May, his fight date could always get pushed back based on the availability of opponents and whether this event all comes together. Is it going to be a free show,
like Sebastian's fight was this past weekend, or is it going to be a pay-per-view?
I think that all depends on who the opponent is. If it's somebody like Edgar, they would try to bill it as a pay-per-view, even though I don't think it's pay-per-view worthy. It's a good fight, it would be, but I don't think you should have to pay $80 to see those two guys in what is a non-title fight. And no, interim titles don't count.
Ain't gonna start qualifying them shits. Plant versus Berlanga is a good fight and an intriguing fight, but as a consumer, I don't think you should have to pay $80 to see that. I don't. But that may not stop them from trying.
When is it ever? Caleb Plant has been averaging one fight a year for the last 3 years. He fought once in 2022, once in 2023, and only once in 2024.
The McCumbee fight.
The Trevor McCumbee fight was basically a tune-up fight for Caleb. A rebound fight to rebound off the loss to David Benavidez the year before. So, ideally, he would be stepping into something more serious in May against a more serious opponent than Trevor McCumbee.
Trevor's rumored to be facing Diego Pacheco in Diego's next fight.
Diego, who was in talks with Christian Mabili, but they just couldn't work it out. Christian's team want home field advantage, and so does Diego's. Thus, they're left at an impasse, and Diego seems to be moving on, which means that maybe Caleb can fight Christian Mabili?
I doubt it.
Doubt it, because Christian is aligned with Top Rank, whereas Caleb, for whatever reason, is still over there at the PBC when the best fights for him aren't even over there. What are you talking about? A Berlanga fight? A Munguia fight? A Mabili fight?
What are you talking about?
The best fights for Caleb involve fighters that are elsewhere. Why he's still over there at the PBC beats me. Based on who they get him for that May show, that'll tell us whether or not he should stay over there or not. If they can get him the Berlanga fight,
All right, I guess.
but if it's just another Trevor McCumbee kind of guy, if it's that same kind of opponent, well, it would seem he's wasting his time over there, because you already had your rebound fight. You already had a tune-up. You're gonna have 2 tune-ups back-to-back?
That's the bane of the super middleweight division. In spite of what efforts we've seen the last year and a half to blur the lines, the political boundary lines that prevent fights from happening, the politics are still there, and the super middleweight division is a prime example, because this is a deep division with many good fighters in it, but there are not that many good fights happening.
At super middleweight, you've got Munguia, Mabili, Melakuziev,
Lester Martinez,
Kevin Lele Sajo, Diego Pacheco,
Caleb Plant,
Edgar Berlanga. Not that I think Edgar is a good fighter, because I don't, but he's there, and he is a person of interest to a lot of these fighters. So you can mix and match the names in your head all you want, but in reality, a lot of these guys ain't fighting each other.
and that's the problem. It's a deep division.
With many sharks in it, but they're not swimming in the same ocean.
It may as well not be.
Caleb still being over there at the PBC of all places is tantamount to him being stuck in a fishbowl. The best fights for you are out there, beyond the horizon.
We'll see who they get him.
If you beat Canelo Alvarez,
Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna say if, I'm gonna say when. When I beat Canelo Alvarez, I think I'm gonna be, top 3, pound for pound, best fighters ever. I think Canelo is up there with the all-time greats too. I already look at myself as an all-time great, but to move up essentially 3 weight classes, and dethrone soon to be undisputed 168 champion without even stepping foot in that weight class or the weight class below is like some Henry Armstrong stuff. It's gonna be amazing. Like they always say, you never see a great small guy beat a great big guy. And I want to change that narrative.
I at least agree with Terrence on the sentiment that if he were to pull this miracle off, you'd have to rank him pretty high on an all-time great list. Now, I don't keep one myself because that's far too much data for one person to tabulate.
If what we're talking about is the entire history of boxing, all the fighters, all the champions,
Across all the ages, all the eras, I think that's far too much data for one person to tabulate accurately. I think you would need to pool all the data together you can, then perhaps enter it into an algorithm.
or an artificial intelligence with certain bullet points, certain criteria.
Sort of how the Ring IQ pound for pound list is structured, and its bullet points, how many divisions was a guy a champion in across how many weight classes? How many titles did he win in those weight classes? How many of them did he unify? How many times did he defend them? How many top 10 contenders did the fighter fight? How long was the fighter's reign? Just things along that line that essentially encompass a fighter's ability, a fighter's greatness, because if you can tick off on all these boxes, then you're some hell of a fighter.
Says a lot about your ability, but when you're talking about an all-time great list, the reason I don't keep one is because there's far too much data to tabulate to do so accurately. You'd need a computer.
It's a lot. But at minimum, I do agree with Terrence that if he were to win that fight in September, he's definitely one of the all-time greats. I mean, I think he's one of the all-time greats now. He's a 2-time undisputed champion and a 4-weight champion overall. If he beats Canelo, that makes him a 5-weight champion, having been undisputed 3 times. That's monumental.
There's a lot of champions in the sport of boxing. There are even a lot of unified champions in the sport of boxing. But guys like Terrence...
It's a generational talent, whether some people want to accept it or not. Dmitry Bivol seems to like his chances against Canelo. He sat down with Ring Magazine to talk about that fight.
First reaction, of course, it was about size of Crawford. Is it okay for him to move up for 2 weight classes, yeah, or not? But then I saw him in Dubai maybe a month ago. I saw him. He's big, and he has very good skills. He's one of my favorite boxers. He able to win this fight. But there is a lot of but, and even not but, there is a lot of things, small things, which we don't know how he will deal with this. He need to get used to the power and pressure of 168, because it's big difference, to be honest.
I mean, if somebody like Dmitry Bivol, who's actually been in there with Canelo Alvarez and seems to be an admirer of Terence Crawford's boxing, is giving him a fighting chance, that's worth noting. That's intriguing. And that's what you're selling. The intrigue. You're selling the sizzle, not the steak.
And there are enough people getting behind Terence Crawford for this fight that it has sparked my curiosity. This is a guy who barely loses a round in a fight.
Perhaps he can pull this miracle off. He's determined to, or perhaps he's biting off more than he can chew. This is a mountain too high to climb.
Either way, I want to see it. It's exciting. And boxing needs excitement, especially in the American market, where these two fighters are two of the more prominent figures in the American boxing scene.
If in spite of the intangibles, someone like Dmitry Bivol is giving Terence a fighting chance, I think that's worth some consideration.
And I've noticed the last couple of months, since Terence Crawford made it his mission to challenge Canelo Alvarez, there have been a growing number of individuals trashing him where they weren't trashing him before, questioning his resume. I think they do so out of fear.
That's not to say Canelo Alvarez has anything to be afraid of or that Canelo is scared, but I do think they're scared for him, because if he loses, that's not a good look. That you lost to a 37-year-old fighter jumping up 2 weight classes?
It's a situation where Terence can go up there and get a draw, and he still wins a moral victory if Canelo doesn't take him out.
There are a lot of narratives attached to this thing, and it's the fans themselves that cook them up.
When if you take a more neutral view of the situation, Terence is a great fighter. So is Canelo. This is just 2 great fighters duking it out. You don't have to trash one in favor of the other, because if the one you trashed is the one that wins, you look like a goddamn idiot. Yeah, maybe that's what they're afraid of.
I don't begrudge Terence his ambition. If he thinks he can beat Canelo Alvarez, I'd like to see it. Let's see if you can do it.